Now, may I ask a few questions of you?
Sure.
We're talking about souls.
Yep.
How and where did you learn about people's souls and your ability to understand things like this?
From the 7 masters that work with me. When I was getting to a point to where I was aware that guides were working through me, I made a decision I'm only going to work with ascended masters. And the 7 ascended masters I work with were all on the earth.
Alive.
Lived an earth life.
Okay.
And now they're on the karmic board, so they have a much better understanding of the human condition. And I spent many lifetimes working to where I am now. You have to work through, we have to constantly work through whatever problems we might have or whatever challenges we might have with no fear. So I have a great deal of faith, not religion, faith. And I have a great deal of trust. And that started with, I don't know if you want to hear the story about my first communion.
Of course.
Well, that's where it really started. I had 7 sisters and 2 brothers, so the house full, and I was going for my first communion. And of course, Irish Catholic nuns and priests and whatnot. I was looking forward to it because that's the day you get to get dressed up all in all new clothes, and you get to sit up in the front of the church. If you were poor, you didn't sit in the front of the church. So in catechism class, they were telling us all about mortal sins and venial sins, and we commit mortal sins, we're going to burn in hell for the rest of our lives. And I said, well, how can you burn in hell if you're already dead? Well, that started a whole rigmarole. I wasn't old enough, or no, I hadn't reached the stage of reasoning, so I couldn't make my first communion.
They stopped you from getting your first
Well,
communion?
as the story went, I was furious and got very angry. And I went home to my mother, pulling on her skirt, saying they wouldn't let me make my first communion because I hadn't reached the age of reasoning. And she just said, well, that's okay, you can make it next year, which made me twice as angry. So I went to bed angry. I had this dream. I'm in the church on First Communion Day, stuck behind the confessional box. And I was pudgy as a kid. And everybody is walking up the aisle all dressed up for the First Communion, and Father Ryan is fussing with everybody, and the nuns are genuflecting, and Father Ryan, when he got nervous, would clatter the beads in his pocket. And I'm still stuck behind the confessional box looking like a drowned rat, and my mother would kill me if I ended up in a church like that. So anyway, all of a sudden the whole church becomes quiet. And on the altar, the roof opened up, and you know the sunbeams that come through?
Yeah.
Well, Jesus Christ himself landed on the top of the altar, not looking anything like what we thought he looked like. He's got like a sack on him, barefoot, shoulder-length hair, no beard, big nose, brown. And Father Ryan runs up saying, nervous. Asked him what could he do for him, and he says, I want to speak to Phil Lynch. That was my childhood name. And the priest said, well, she's not here, she's not making her first communion. And Jesus said to him, she's down behind the confessional box, go get her. And so Father Ryan comes all the way down, grabs my hand, very angry with me, pulls me out, and now I know I'm going to hell. Now I'm saying the act of contrition, you know. We learned all of that in the first communion class. So I'm definitely going to hell. Drags me up the front, and people are going, why would Jesus want to talk to her? So he brings me all the way up to the front of the church in front of everybody, me looking like a drowned rat, leaves me there. And Jesus just, you know, just waved me to come up. So I get up on the next step. Now I'm in a total different energy. You can't even describe it. Everybody disappears. There's just me and him. And he brings me closer. The energy will nearly make you faint. It's so unbelievably beautiful. So he says to me, it doesn't matter if you make your first communion or not. He says, all you have to know is that I love you and nothing will ever happen to you. And I woke right up.
Wow.
I jumped out of the bed screaming to everybody, I don't have to make first communion, I don't have to make first communion. Went to school, same thing, out in the yard, I don't have to make first communion. You know, Jesus told me, and that went on. Now we have the parish priest and 3 other nuns interviewing me about why I don't have to make my first communion. So I relayed the whole story to them. Went home, my mother told me I was making my first communion. I said, why? Because Father Ryan was at the house and told her I was making it and that I had a vision. So I said, well, what's a vision? And she said, well, they thought you saw Jesus. I said, well, I did in my dream. And then nothing was ever the same after that. And from that on, a lot of tragedy in my life before I was 21 years old, but got through it all like that.
Great. And interesting that Jesus Christ was in your dream.
Yeah.
How do you feel about him today?
Oh, I could channel him. I can bring him right in and channel him, but I'd have to go into a trance channel for that. Mm-hmm. Oh, I've had lots of dreams about him, lots of talks about him, lots of talks with him. I've danced with him in my dreams. And I'm telling you, get into that energy, you do not want to leave it. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable.
And what a great story.
What a great experience.
Yes.
It was.